Now, Hordak reveals the most gruesome trap ever. The Horde Slime Pit.
The what?
The Slime Pit.
Hello and welcome to Intoxicated Masculine, where we talk about drinking culture, pop culture, 1980s cartoon culture, and any other kind of culture that comes up. Joining me as always today is Brandon.
Hello, my people.
Jim.
Hey, everybody.
And Kale. All right, today we're going to be, we finished off with 1983 the last time, and so we're going to pick right back up, conveniently enough, in 1984. So before we talk cartoons, let's talk booze. Brandon, what do you have tonight?
I am having a weird mix that I just kind of poured because it sounded good all together, and this time it's not too bad. It's cold brew, sweet cream, creamer, and some Kansas City whiskey.
I feel like Brandon's cocktail channel would be very different from the cocktail videos that I do, because those are like, sure.
Yep.
But if it works, it works. Jim, what are you having?
I'm with you, Brandon. I've been making things whatever I have in my hand.
Right.
I made myself a Mai Tai with lime juice, orange juice, spiced rum, and a little bit of amaretto.
We will definitely be talking Mai Tai on the cocktail channel. I think I want to wait till it gets a little warmer. Mai Tai is actually one of my favorite cocktails, and I have a bunch of orgeat syrup in the freezer, which I will thaw out when it starts to get a little warmer. But yeah, Mai Tai is a great cocktail. Huh? Orgeat is great. It's
fantastic.
It's an almond cream syrup, basically. Anyway, yeah, it's like you guys don't have like 500 bottles in your basement to choose from or something. It's so weird.
It is like that, yeah.
All right, Kale, what are you having?
Well, I admire the creativity that Brandon and Jim are bringing to the floor right now, but I'm being more traditionalist and having a scotch, which is kind of invisible.
Scotch. Scotchy, scotch.
Half a scotch on me.
I did have a quick question, though. What is the difference between a Mai Tai and a Singapore Sling?
Everything. They're completely different cocktails. Base spirit of a Singapore Sling is gin. Base spirit of a Mai Tai is rum. Singapore Sling is a cool cocktail too. Actually, it's kind of a complicated cocktail to make. There's a lot of ingredients, but it's a good one. Mai Tai is basically just orgeat, lime juice, rum, and I can't think of the rest off the top of my head. It's like more a creamy cocktail, and a Singapore Sling is more like more like a tropically cocktail. Anyway, speaking of tropically cocktails, I have a shelf of spirits that I'm kind of trying to get rid of because they're not my favorite. One of those is a Pisco. Now, I actually love Pisco, but I'm going to upset the Chileans in the group. Some of my best friends' sisters' husbands are Chilean, so I have nothing against the country of Chile or the people of Chile, but I'm sorry, Peru makes better Pisco. And so I'm getting rid of my Chilean Pisco in a Pisco Rita, which is a not particularly clever name for a margarita made of Pisco instead of tequila. Okay, so starting off in 1984,
Wait, 1 second. Kill your background. I was kind of hoping you would save that for badass movie or badass lines of all times, but you should go ahead and say it.
Really?
Well, yeah.
All I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men.
You have to do the setup line, because the setup line is the New Republic guys are around him, and they're like, "Drop your rep, and you're surrounded." And he says, "All I'm surrounded by is fear and
as you
dead
can
men."
see, is in this background. There's like literally like I don't know 200 rebel soldiers around him, and that's him right there.
That is just so good.
And I keep picturing it in my head of the timing of the saber of like all I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men. And
by the way, that
all these guys just shit their pants.
I've not actually read. That's the first Darth Vader series that came out. Not the first Darth Vader series, I'm sure. The one that came out when Marvel kind of took over doing Star Wars comics again. I don't know, Jim, do you remember when that was? Probably like maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
6 years ago, something like that.
Something like that.
Anyway, that's the Darth Vader one, and I haven't read it, but everybody says it's great, so you should check it out. And Jim is surrounded by Transformers and Dead Man. But we will probably get to them here in due time. But first of all, Brandon, I want to ask you about a Fist of the, is it South? No, North. I'm sorry, Fist of the North Star.
All right. Well, I'll full confession, I haven't read well, it's a manga, so I could have read it too, but I haven't watched the entire thing. It's a post-apocalyptic dystopia type of thing, and it's starring a guy named Kenshiro. And remember the movie that's kind of like Hobo with a Shotgun, the guy in prison? He like puts a planer in the guy's face and like ties off his veins and stuff.
Ricky Ho, Ricky.
Imagine that as an anime. He's got this like secret martial arts where he like strikes the vital, secret vital points or whatever, and they just explode into a million gouts of blood and all this. I imagine had I seen this as a kid in the 80s, had my mom seen me seeing this as a kid in the 80s, things would have been vastly different. But no, I watched it a little bit as I was older, but yeah, it's definitely not something that would have taken. I would have gotten in trouble for pretty quickly if I had watched it in the 80s. But it's a kind of a early Shonen Jump one. They're the same ones that make Naruto and Bleach and One Piece. I think maybe One Punch Man too. But anyway, it's pretty good. It actually kind of holds up anime wise in like it's very old school art, but it's good looking old school art. I mean, it's if you were looking for 80s style cartooning, it would be exactly what you were looking for. I could say I would recommend at least giving it a shot.
And I should say this kind of shows our the weakness in our knowledge. If you look at all these 80s cartoons, we all grew up in the Midwest and we didn't get a lot of anime. And so this kind of represents some of the anime. So this our list, not including anime, should not be taken as disrespect on anime or that it isn't good or anything. Brandon watches quite a bit of anime. But at this point in our lives, I don't think anybody's really watching it. So it's more a comment on us than it is on the anime itself. I don't know, Kale or Jim, do you watch Fist of the North Star at all?
I have not.
It sticks in my mind. I've seen a couple episodes here and there when I was a kid, but definitely nothing. Nothing.
Like my anime experience is limited to like Trigun, Cowboy Bebop, Samurai Champloo.
Did you guys ever watch the? I think it's Team Foursquare on YouTube.
No.
They go around and have like different characters from movies, games, anime, or whatever fight Cell from Dragon Ball Z, and one of them is Kenshiro. That one's pretty good.
And for the record, this particular run of Fist of the North Star, let's see here. So the one that starts here, there's apparently two series that take place in the 1980s. I think it first appeared. Well, it looks like they put it on Sci-Fi for a while. It kind of went all over the place here in the US. Oh, excuse me. There was actually, the manga starts in 83, but the actual cartoon show does start in 84. And it went from 84 to 87. And then there was a second series called Fist of the North Star 2, which makes sense, which went from 87 to 88. The first series had 109 episodes and the second had 43 episodes. So it had a good long run. And, I think they're still doing stuff with it today. There's most recently something from... Oh,
was it 1986 film?
Oh, I didn't even know that. And there's also a comic book that was published by Viz, which does a lot of stuff that went from 2003 to 2004. So, yeah, there's a lot of Fist of the North Star.
It is currently sold over 100 million copies. The manga has sold over 100 million copies, making it one of the best-selling manga series in history.
It's one of those things we forget here in the States about manga, because I think all of us have been to comic conventions. Jim's been to a ton. I've been to a fair amount. Brandon's been to a number, and Kale, you've been to a couple at least. And you sort of think of the biggest comic book conventions here in the United States being New York Comic Con and Comic Con in San Francisco, or excuse me, San Diego. And the anime convention that's in Tokyo basically is bigger than both of those conventions combined by a fair amount. So in Japan, anime it's quite big. It's quite big.
There's a lot of really, really good ones. And I wouldn't by any means say Fist of the North Star is up there. I mean, like Cowboy Bebop is really good for its story, its atmosphere, its music, all of those things. Fist of the North Star, I think, is probably more for its outrageous violence and what it kind of led to. Other anime that are kind of similar to it. But
well, if nobody gets strangled by somebody else's intestines, then I'm not interested. So the next one I thought was an interesting thing to talk about, just because of some of the numbers around it. It's Thomas and Friends. It's Thomas the Tank Engine. Did you guys watch that when it was on TV, or when it first came on TV in the 80s?
So I assume this is like the semi live action, it's not animated, right?
Well, I think it's I don't know entirely. I think it was kind of like, is it it's not like claymation, maybe it's like stop motion animation. I'm not entirely sure.
So I definitely did not watch it at the time, but my kids are like 19 and 17, and Thomas the Tank Engine was huge when they were kids. And I assumed the stuff that was on TV was reruns, but I don't know.
That's the crazy thing. It's not reruns.
What?
So this is the thing. I just want to bring this up, Brandon. I want you to talk. So if you have anything more to say about it, the Thomas the Tank Engine has 24 series, 24 seasons, basically. And it has 584 episodes, 14 films, and 6 double-length specials, which basically puts it about double the next closest thing cartoon show I found in the 80s. I had no idea this show was that big, but yeah, it was finally apparently went off the air in 2021. So it has been going from the series aired from 9th of October 1984 to the 20th of January 2021. So it's only been off the air for about a year, and it started in 1984. This started before my wife was born.
It's not a good show. Like,
no, it is. There is some good episodes. I had to watch it with my kid, but there is some good stuff in there.
I feel like the trains are all whiny bitches.
There's one angry one. There's one grumpy one.
Yeah. And on the flip side, like, I don't know, like it's sending a terrible message to kids about the value of work and how, like, I don't know. Like it's the anti-work cartoon.
Well, yeah, there's probably that. I don't know. I had to watch a lot of it with Colston, and there is a lot to watch. The storyline is always pretty simplistic, but there is a whole lot of, like, even regardless of what the boss says, helping each other out type of stuff. So,
yeah.
Apparently, the series was first actually conceived back in 1979. So it's the plot or the idea of the show is actually about the same age as me. Yeah, I don't really have a lot to say about the show, but I think it definitely deserves mentioning that a show can last from 1984 to 2021.
And it's everywhere.
And yeah, it's everywhere. It's still everywhere. So yeah, that's all I have to say about it. But I just thought it's of note that an 80s cartoon just went off the air last year.
You can kind of see when the animation started picking up too, because it did start off as kind of a claymation type of thing, but then once it started making money, it went into more of an animated thing, and you can tell when the proceeds started going higher.
So I think I would recommend maybe start off trying a few episodes and don't immediately decide to binge the entire thing, because that will take you a very, very long time.
Yes.
Give it a season or two and see if you like it. If you do, maybe get more, but don't plan the whole series. Don't plan the whole series watch through in a weekend, because it's not going to happen.
I will just add, my oldest son was pretty into Thomas, and we went up to Boone to see Thomas the Tank Engine in real life. And
I am from Boone. I remember when we got that engine.
He was a little creeped out by the life-size train with the googly eyes.
That's not an unreasonable reaction. Okay, so we're gonna move on to our next one, and this I think is, I never realized this, but so starting September, so we're gonna talk about Challenge of the Gobots. Which Challenge of the Gobots was nobody's first pick for their favorite cartoon show. It's sort of like Transformers, but a little more cut rate. The interesting thing, Challenge of the Gobots actually started 1 week before Transformers. It started on September 8th, and Transformers started on September 17th. And I find it just kind of fascinating that the one that people call the ripoff actually came, admittedly not much earlier, but came about a week before Transformers did.
But isn't that the same thing that happened with the rock hitting Earth movies? The straight-to-video one came out.
That's possible.
Earlier.
That is possible. But also, if they came out at exactly the same time, I can't imagine that. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say who had the idea first or any of that, but they clearly came out very similar times.
So I don't know about GoBots, but I know the Transformers, the toys, existed a long time before the TV show, and it was actually 2 different toy lines for the Transformers. So I don't know about the GoBots, whether the toys and the show were one thing.
Hello, this is Mike in editing. I just wanted to clear this up. So the Transformers line did start in 1984, at the same time as the TV show, or roughly the same time as the TV show. However, it was sort of using molds that had been used to make other Japanese toys from a toy company called Takara. The toy lines were Diaclone and Microchange. However, the GoBots actually started before the toy line started before the show as well. So they were first introduced in 1983 by Tonka, and they were actually a takeoff also on a previously existing toy brand by Bandai called Machine Robo, which is also sort of similar to the Transformers. I don't know how far back those go. But it does appear that GoBots was pre-existing to Transformers by roughly a year. So I think it'd be unfair to call either one a ripoff of the other, since they both were kind of, GoBots is earlier, but not much earlier. So there you go. There's your news on the GoBots.
I never actually got a Transformers toy, but I did have a GoBot toy. And I can tell you this, the GoBot transforms in like 5 moves.
Right. Yeah.
Those Transformers transform in like 14 moves. So
the Transformers were ridiculously complicated. We'll talk about them in a minute. I remember liking GoBots as being kind of a fun show. It's got our friend Frank Welker in it, so we're safe there. I don't know. I mean, it's bad robots fight good robots. The main villain was a motorcycle who was Cykill, which I think that's solid pun. That's solid, clever name, Cykill. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, did you guys watch GoBots, or were you too upper class for the GoBots?
I don't even remember seeing GoBots on the TV, quite honestly. I had the Cykill action figure, and it was a terrible toy.
I don't know that I saw it.
I think I had
I
Cykill.
remember seeing it on. What's that?
I think I had Cykill. I don't remember most of the stuff about it, but I remember watching it and really enjoying it.
What's that, Kel?
You put one of his wheels on his back.
I thought they went in his shoulders, didn't they?
No, I think he had one in his arm, didn't he? I thought one was he like had as a shield or something.
Maybe.
I think you could put it in his hand, like on the outside of his hand,
Just like that.
inside.
I just remember the guy that
The
I
front
had
ones
was
were-
red.
The hands were like
It was
the
like a-
front bars. Anyway,
I'm not going to say it was a great show. I'm not going to say that. But Frank
came
Welker did play a
before-
character called Screwhead, which, you know, I mean, honestly, there's some decent names in here.
I mean, he had something to do with Transformers too.
Well, I'm sure, but I'm just saying, you know, that's not nothing. There is a Gobot named Vanguard. I can only assume he transforms into a van. If he doesn't, then I don't really know what they're going for, but he must transform into a van. Cykill, Baron Von Joy, the Jeeper Creeper. Come on, that's good.
Sheeper.
The Jeeper Creeper, except they spell with a G instead of a J, which is odd. Cop Tour. They're reaching a little, I think. I don't love that one.
so is that a police helicopter?
It's a helicopter, but it's spelled COP-TUR. Cop Tour.
COBD.
Okay, fine. And then Screwhead, which, you know, I mean, if you want to watch Frank Welker voice something, you want to watch him voice Screwhead, which is great, I think. No love for Gobots. God, bunch of snobs in here. We don't like your low class Gobots.
I can't tell. Like I said, I can't. I remember there was like some GoBots in like a McDonald's thing, and I think I remembered that. I remember thinking that it was just McDonald's being cheap on Transformers. I don't think I ever actually watched any of the GoBots.
I can't tell you I watched a bunch of it. I did watch some of it, and I remember enjoying it, and that's it. I don't know. That's the one thing that's sort of nice about being a kid is you can watch something terrible and just love it. It's just like the greatest thing ever. You know, it's like cut rate BS stuff, and you're just like, that's the greatest thing ever. Meanwhile, your parents are like, oh, I hope you get sick of this at some point, but you never will. I know, Brandon, did you ever have to watch that Coco Melon on Netflix?
Not with Coulson, but my two youngest nieces introduced me to it.
Because that show, it just going to show you how intense kids are into a thing. That show was in the top 10 viewed things on Netflix for like 40 weeks straight. And I just feel sorry for the parents that had to watch Coco Melon beginning to end 17 times in 3 months. It just
yeah, you can never really stop watching it.
Yeah, that's
There's this other one where it's like these two little worms, and I can't remember what it's called, but like every episode something terrible happens.
On this episode, something terrible happens.
They're both squashed and they die screaming. This is not a kid's show.
And there's like a million episodes.
The next one, I don't have a ton to say about either, but I do think it's sort of one of those notable ones. And that's Dragon's Lair. Because that game was in a lot of arcades, and I think it was medium popular. And I think the main reason it wasn't more popular is because it was incredibly, incredibly difficult. And it wasn't like any conventional game. You just had to press a button, and you have to know what button to press. And like you pressed it at just the right moment, or you died, and there's your quarter. And like nobody wants to play that game in an arcade because you could sit there, you know, and pump $100 into this stupid game and still maybe never win. Even though for the time period, like the graphics were insanely good for the time period. Like it was very, very high quality animation. And it was starring Dirk the Daring, which is a great name. Yeah, I don't know. Did you guys watch the cartoon show at all? I don't think I ever watched the cartoon.
I had a vague memory of the cartoon existing, but I have distinct memories of the video game. So I grew up in the area here, and the arcade at Valley West Mall. That was a huge draw for a little while in the arcade. And I don't remember, but I remember thinking it was expensive, so I'm wondering if it was more than a quarter to play. Also,
I think it was probably a quarter, but I think it was just you had, because it was so easy to die that you'd end up putting, because there were those 50-cent games, and screw those games that are like 50. Like who has 50 cents?
Dude, 25 cents was expensive back then.
Right. And especially if your 25 cents is going to get you literally like 5 seconds of play. Like you literally come on the game, press a button. Sorry, wrong button. You're dead. Give me another quarter.
Like your mom gives you $1. Now here, leave me alone for 30 minutes.
And instead it was like
Lair, and you die in like 2 minutes.
I honestly don't remember this at all.
You don't remember
Like,
Dragon Lair?
There was even
at all. There was even a sequel too. It was like somewhat kind of different.
There was some kind of control. It wasn't just buttons. But yeah, I remember like it'd be like, "Do you want to do this?" And then like a bunch of skulls would come out and bite him to death.
Yeah, it was incredibly easy to die. Oh, Space Ace. There was another game that they did a sequel to this, and there was also Space Ace. That was basically the same game, except it was sci-fi instead of fantasy.
So I've never heard of that. I will say I probably watched the video game more than I saw the cartoon on TV. So
the cartoon only went from September to December of 1984. So this was definitely not what you call a successful cartoon.
Right.
But I do think it was sort of an interesting little kind of a revolution in the game development, just because it was so weird. But again, like you're saying, if you're at the arcade and you have a choice between putting a quarter in this and playing like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Trapped in Time or X-Men, that's not even you're not even thinking about that.
X-Men wasn't around, right? You were having to play like Tron or.
I played X-Men. Maybe you were too old for X-Men.
1984.
Oh, in 1984. Yeah, probably not 1984. Yes, that's right.
So I will tell you how old I am. At the arcade, my preferred game when Dragon Lair came out was they had it was a dome, and it had little animatronic robots or monsters that went up buildings, and there was a helicopter went around, and you had to shine the light on the monsters to keep them from climbing up the buildings. I have no idea what this game was. Bizarre.
That sounds like a terrible game.
Right.
That sounds just awful.
Terrible.
It reminds me of Rampage.
What's that?
It sounds like Rampage, but less fun. It sounds like it sounds like you're playing Rampage, except instead of one of the big monsters, you're just flying around the monsters.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And Jim, actually, when he first went to the arcade, you actually had to crank the arcade up to get it to work.
Exactly.
Assuming there wasn't like a bomb drill and you had to head into the fallout shelter, of course. I don't know, Kale, do you have any other arcade experiences with Dragon's Lair?
I just remember dying a lot, and I have an idea about why the cartoon is so short-lived. Since you're talking about the graphics in the game, it was very cartoonishly animated in the game itself. So I wonder if for the cartoon itself, they just went to the animators of the game and said, "Hey, just make this complete into a series where the hero, goes through all these challenges and then wins." And then they were like, "Okay, we did that. Let's go make something else now."
Well, to be honest, I think the animation in the game was better than the animation in the cartoon, because I'm sort of looking at some of the frames, and the animation in the cartoon doesn't look very good, but I remember the animation in the game being quite good. Yeah, I don't know. By the way, the X-Men arcade game came out in 1992. So yeah, I was off by about 8 years. It's all right. It's all right. Some of us are old. So the next one is a show that I loved, and I have a sneaking suspicion nobody else even liked, and that is Muppet Babies from 1984. Just quickly, did you guys watch the show, or were you into it at all?
Yeah, I watched it a ton.
I watched it a bit.
Kale? I don't know. I thought that cartoon that was like one of my top cartoons. It had one of the best opening theme songs. It had a great opening theme. They were always going on like adventures that they were not actually going on because it was just there in their imagination. I don't know. Either that show was fantastic.
I remember at one point, who was it? Grover, I think it was, asked Kermit about brushing his teeth since he didn't have any teeth. He says he brushes his tongue twice a day. I still remember that scene.
It's sort of funny because I remember I watched Muppet Babies way more than I ever watched the actual Muppets. And so oftentimes if there would be like a Muppet thing on, I would be kind of disappointed because like the Muppet Babies way better. And by the way, who voiced Baby Kermit? Frank Welker.
Of course he did. Jeez.
That guy got around.
He just did everything.
He also did Beaker, which I sort of get because Beaker doesn't really have a voice. And also, interestingly, another person that pops on the scene here, and has probably been doing stuff before this, but will be familiar to more people in live action. Dave Coulier did a bunch of voices on there. Who would later go on to star in the Netflix show Fuller House. Yeah, I can't think of any specific episodes. Like, I think it's really tough to remember episodes because I mean, I would have been like 4 years old at this time. But I just remember like really being excited about what like the new, imagination adventure they would go on. And like, sometimes Kermit would be like Indiana Jones and sometimes they'd be in space. I don't know. I think it was just a great kid show for that because they could like, when you're a kid, you just want aliens in the in the Temple of Doom, and also there's Star Wars, and like you just kind of you see all these properties and you just kind of want them all to be together. And I think Muppet Babies is great at that because they could just do basically whatever they wanted. And there was Frank Welker.
I was thinking about it, and then you kind of brought it up too. What, on a side note, what 80s cartoon has the best opening theme song?
Oh, I think that's a tough one. Because there's a lot of really good games. I would put Muppet Babies up there.
It's Thundar. Why are you even asking?
Which one? Oh my god.
Thundar.
It's just really good. It's good for the 80s that the X-Men animated series was in the 90s, so it isn't in the running because the X-Men animated series clearly had the best theme song of any cartoon ever.
Didn't the X-Men have the best of everything ever?
I'll tell you what. I think we could do a show just specifically comparing and contrasting Batman the Animated Series and X-Men the Animated Series because they're both so good and yet they're totally different. Like
Batman
I don't think
the Animated has the best Joker.
You can make that argument. I don't know if I necessarily buy it, but you can make that argument. But no, like Batman the Animated Series and X-Men were both great cartoons. And yet you could not confuse the animation style, the music, the voice acting. Like it was all very different, but they're both really good. And the only negative thing about the X-Men animated series was Jubilee. Because Jubilee was a bad character. And in the comics, she was a vampire for a while, and then she wasn't. I don't know. Comics are weird.
Vampire that shoots fireworks?
No, I think when she was a vampire, she couldn't. But I don't know. Jim, do you know much of that era of X-Men?
I tried to read as few comic books about vampires as humanly possible. So
yeah, but in Marvel, you can't do that. In Marvel, you're going to hit vampires again at some point. You just are.
And then I just skip it.
I would say, as far as best opening theme song, DuckTales is probably up there. Chippendale's Rescue Rangers is probably up there. Those things stick in your head.
DuckTales probably the best adapted video game. The DuckTales video game from the 80s was fantastic. It was very simple and yet very entertaining, and it was challenging but not crazy hard. It was a great video game. I bought a reissue of it or whatever on Steam a few years ago, and it holds up very, very well.
Family Guy did an homage.
Go ahead, Kel. I'm sorry.
Where Family Guy did an homage to DuckTales where Peter was rich and he had a big room full of gold coins and he went to go dive into them, and of course all his bones broke because you can't swim through a giant pile of gold coins.
I don't like Family Guy.
Whereas Scrooge, I get it.
I don't like Family Guy.
Is it because you don't like what's his face?
Well, I think Seth MacFarlane. So we're getting a little far afield. I know. I just feel like Seth MacFarlane is he's very like two notes. Like that's what he's got for all of his comedy. Although I've heard his Star Trek homage show is very good, which of course I can't think of the name of it right now. Jim.
Below Decks.
No, Lower Decks is actually Star Trek. No, it's the show that's basically Star Trek with a different name and different separate.
Oh, I don't know. You're asking the wrong person.
Galaxy Quest.
No, that's not Seth MacFarlane. You people are no help at all.
Oh,
I
know what you're talking about. I can't think of
Voyager.
Voyager is Star Trek. Kale, no. Down.
It's the
Down,
Orville.
Kale.
The Orville? Is that it?
The Orville, yeah, the Orville.
I was thinking animated. So I was
no, not animated.
Yeah.
The Orville I've heard is really good. I haven't seen it myself, but
that's what I hear too. I'm
Getting back to 80s cartoons.
I've kind of quit Star Trek and Star Trek associated things.
we're gonna do a big Star Trek episode one of these days.
That's great as long as it's about Wrath of Khan and Wrath of Khan, the remake. That'll be fine.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it. I love Wrath of Khan the movie, but I don't know. Star Trek's always weird. It can be very spotty. Anyway, the next one I don't have a lot to say about either. We're kind of working our way up to the one that I think we're probably going to have the most to say about. But I don't think we can get out of this without talking about My Little Pony. My Little Pony and Friends. I think it's again not something I watched. I read a little bit of the stuff that was coming out in the mid to late 2000s, and it was pretty good. But that has really lasted. I mean, it's a show that's not any one series, but it's had a lot of they do new things. They'll have new comic books, new shows. Starting off in 1984, and I don't know. Did you guys watch it all, or have people in your household that watched, or?
So in the 2000s, were you a brony?
I was not. However, if anybody wants to watch, Jenny Nicholson does a great video about the Last Bronycon, because Baltimore, a place that I go relatively regularly, had the biggest brony convention in the country. And she did a video about the Last Bronycon, and it is very, very interesting and very fun to watch.
Jenny Nicholson is really good all around.
She was horse famous, which is a term that I'm not going to tell you what it means. You're going to have to watch the video.
So I did not watch this in the 80s. I watched one of the remakes for probably a season with my kids. They like My Little Ponies.
Was that like the Friendship is Magic, or was it before that?
I don't know. Probably would have been like 2010, 2008.
Yeah, probably that, because that's the one where it had this huge resurgence. Yeah.
So also around 2001, I bought my nieces were really into it, and it was hard to find here, and I was unemployed and went on a trip with my wife to Europe, and found some My Little Pants, but they were not My Little Ponies. They're Mon Petite Ponies.
There's probably a really good show just talking about the foreign ripoffs of these 1980s cartoons and all the things that are like almost the cartoon, except not quite, like just barely skirting trademark laws. My
sister had a lot of the My Little Pony toys back in the 80s, but even there, I don't know that she watched the show all that much. I think she liked the toys more than the show.
What was your sister's favorite? Like, what would she watch like all the time? We'll get a female perspective by proxy.
Well, honestly, mostly the same. I mean, like I said, we didn't have cable, so it was just whatever was on Saturday morning. We just plowed through it all, really. I mean, she didn't much care for Transformers, but those were on before school, so
fair enough.
It wasn't a Saturday morning problem.
My sister was into the My Little Ponies and the Rainbow Brights and Care Bears and all that.
We both like the Punky Brewster one, so we watched that a lot.
The cartoon or the live action?
Cartoon.
Fair enough.
The one with Glomer.
Yeah.
But anyway, My Little Pony. Yeah, my sister had the. I don't know. It was a white one, and it had some symbol on its butt. I don't know. They all had symbols on their butts. And it had I can't remember if it had just pink hair or if it had rainbow colored hair, but yeah, I don't really remember much about the show. I think it was kind of along the same lines as the Care Bears. Like they all had like special powers or whatever. They would shoot out of their head or whatever. I don't know.
I thought you were going to say butts.
That would be a terrible power. I'm just going to shoot my love out of my butt at you. Whoa, I don't like where this cartoon's going.
Sounds very suggestive.
Isn't there an animal on Uncle Grandpa that does that? Is there a tiger that shoots rainbow out of its butt? Do you guys ever watch Uncle Grandpa?
I've seen it.
Everybody just be silent.
That's kind of what just happened.
You can edit all this out, right?
Well, I mean, it could or will, because those are two very different questions. I absolutely could. So the next one is another one it was big for a lot of people, I think. And it's the Snorks.
So much to see waiting for you and me. Swim along with the have some fun with the come along with the Snorks.
The only thing I remember about them is they had their Snork thing that shot things out.
Bubbles.
So, does somebody care to spread a little bit more light on what?
The Snorks is an underwater version of the Smurfs, basically.
Okay.
If you look, the animation's very similar too.
I don't remember this at all.
Really? Well, like, except I think there was more than one girl Snork. But like there was different ones. There was like the nerdy one that had glasses, and there was like the cool one, and kind of along those same lines as Smurfs, except I don't know that they had an arch nemesis. You might want to look that up real quick, Mike, if you can. But I just remember like each episode they would have, there would be some issue that would come up, and then they would all figure out by the end of the show, how to fix the problem. Very same concept. It's very basic concept that most of these shows all had. But it was basically, just an underwater version of the Smurfs.
The villains were Dr. Strange Snork, which is a great name. Big Weed, which is suggestive. Lil Seaweed, Weed and Wood, the Great Snork Nork, voiced by, say it with me, Frank Welker. And the Snork Eaters, who are apparently large red creatures known to prey upon Snorks, which sounds very scary. The interesting thing I find about this, so we've sort of talked about episodes, and like, by the way, Alan Oppenheimer did some voices on the Snorks too, because apparently you have to have both of them.
He made the bomb and did the Snorks.
So the first series went for 13 episodes, just in 1984. The second series is in 1985, goes 10 episodes. The third series skips a year to 1987, is 13 episodes, and the fourth season is in 1988 and goes 29 episodes. So it had a pretty good run, a better run than a lot of shows in that era did. It looks like about 108 episodes, which again, for a show in that period is pretty good, especially when it was on for 4 years. I think it's odd it skipped a year. That seems very strange that they would take it off the air for 1 year and then bring it back a year later, and then it went on for the year after that.
Yeah.
And it's Hanna-Barbera. I probably should have been saying where these came from. This is Hanna-Barbera. And yeah, it looks like very much just like what Cale said, kind of underwater Smurfs.
I guess snork is like snorkeling.
I would presume so.
Well, because they all had snorkels or snork.
Makes sense.
Apparently a long development process. It was first developed back in 1977, but just kind of had a slow development, never made it on air till 1984. So kind of a long development for a Hanna-Barbera cartoon.
I'm wondering if it's the same animators that did Smurfs.
I don't know. Was Smurfs Hanna-Barbera? I'll check that out.
The actual art in the show looks very similar as well. Like they had the characters have the same style of eyes and stuff like that. They were different colors though. They weren't like all blue, but like there was the ones that were like there was one guy that was blue, and then the eyes and everything. I'm like, this dude looks just like a Smurf.
They weren't the same creators, but they were both Hanna-Barbera. So you can imagine, kind of some of the same people worked on them. Now, this is we sort of talked about I think we already talked a little bit about DC, but this is the Super Friends Legendary Superpowers show.
Super Friends, the legendary superpowers show.
Hanna-Barbera also.
So let me just jump in here. This is
you jump right in.
So the previous good version of the Super Friends was in the late 70s with Challenge of the Super Friends, where the Super Friends fought the Legion of Doom, where the villains all hid in a swamp and battled a supervillain team.
I remember the swamp bad guys.
Yeah. So this is, I don't know, like 6 years later. They kind of rebooted the Super Friends and made Darkseid the main villain. Lex Luthor and Brainiac are still prominent villains. They're
Jim, who do you think voiced Darkseid?
Frank Welker.
It wasn't Frank Welker.
Who do you think voiced Batman?
Well, I can tell you, but I have to look for it.
It's not a trick question.
Wow, it was Adam West.
Yeah, I want to know who Casey Kasem voiced though.
Shaggy.
I'll try to find him. Keep talking.
Shaggy?
I'll find it and I'll let you know.
So Lex Luthor and Brainiac were revamped to be the modern version of Lex Luthor and Brainiac that came out of, I think, is it Crisis? Is that the big DC reboot in the 80s?
Was that Crisis on Two Earths? Or was that Crisis on Infinite Earths? I can't remember which one's which. I'm not a DC person.
I think it's Crisis on Infinite Earths. There's so many Crisis now that it's hard to keep track of what the titles all were. But I mean, this was the first one. The other thing of note is that they're, unlike the 70s version, there was an awesome toy line that went with this by Kenner. The figures were pretty cool. It also brought in like some heroes that weren't in the previous incarnation, like Firestar. There were other made-up heroes that really weren't in the comic books, like El Dorado and Samurai and Apache Chief.
I was just gonna say Apache Chief.
Black Vulcan.
Gleek?
Yeah, he's the monkey.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I knew that. By the way, Casey Kasem voiced Dick Grayson Robin and Mirror Master.
See, I don't even remember Mirror Master being on the show. But so I think this was on for several more years in the 80s. I think maybe it had different names, but it was all still basically the Super Friends versus Darkseid for several years.
It lists this as being 8 episodes, but again, with some of these, they keep redoing it, but under a different name, but it's the same storyline, and it's kind of hard to keep track of. So we'll kind of keep track of most of it here. The heroes were Superman, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Firestorm, Black Vulcan, Gleek, Apache Chief, Samurai, El Dorado, and the Wonder Twins. And
so no Flash.
Apparently, that's weird. Yeah, I guess not.
That is weird with Mirror Master being in there.
I wonder if he was maybe in. I wonder if he was in an episode or two.
He was in the toy line. I know that.
Character to me.
What's that?
Apache Chief seems like an interesting character to me. There's a lot of facets there to cross, especially in these times.
Well, being in the 80s, I'm sure they didn't cross any of those.
in the 70s, I always thought it was it's kind of interesting because his counterpart, like, he grew big, and his counterpart in the Legion of Doom was a lady in a leopard dress that grew big. I just thought it was kind of interesting. The
It lists the main villains as Darkseid, Calibac, Desaad, Brainiac, Mirror Master, Lex Luthor, Mr. Mixaplixit, the Robber Baron, and Dollmaker.
Yep. And it's mostly Darkseid and Darkseid's crew, and then occasionally Brainiac and Lex Luthor.
Make it sound like a rap group. It's Darkseid and Darkseid's crew. Coming up in here with some doom.
Is Mixaplixit the one where he had to say his name backwards or something to get him going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember him.
Mixaplixit.
Yeah, I can't say that. I can't say that forward. Oh, Renee Auberjonois.
Juan.
Who played on Deep
Odo.
Space Nine. Odo on Deep Space Nine played Desaad. So, yeah, a lot of good people on that.
And he was on Mr. Belvedere.
Yes, he was.
Oh, yeah.
And we can all agree 100% that Deep Space Nine is the best Star Trek property, and we all agree. So that's good that we all agree on.
Actually, I do like Deep Space Nine, but I was always more of a next generation guy. Picard's my guy. Sorry.
I'm going to hold back all my feelings. We'll talk about Star Trek on another time. I think that there's two other shows we're going to talk about, and they're both about robots. And neither of these robots are called Gobots, which is a big shame. The first of these robots is called the Transformers.
The Transformers, more than meets the eye. The Transformers.
Brandon, have you ever heard of these creatures before?
I have. Yes. One of my son's all-time favorite cartoons. He's never seen the 80s one, but he loves every facet of them. He has seen the 80s movie, where they pretty much all die. The movie's got quite a cast too. It's got, all the regular voices, but then it's got Leonard Nimoy as Galvatron and Orson Welles as Unicron.
There's a parent. Go ahead and talk about Transformers. There's a quote I want to bring up. So talk more about them. What was your experience? Who was your favorite Transformers?
Well, I mean, for me, my favorite as a kid and now has always been Starscream. I'm a big Starscream fan. I could watch him betray and then grovel daily. I think he's great.
I thought Soundwave was the best because, he had the cool voice. He had multiple cassettes with him, so he could have Ravage, Rumble, and Laserbeak. Plus, every time Megatron transformed into a gun, Soundwave was always the one that held him and shoot.
Well, Starscream did a couple of times too. Just Megatron wasn't dumb enough to put himself in the hands of Starscream. He would have just thrown him in the ocean or something.
So
I see the appeal of Starscream because he's such an antagonist character. Like, even though he was one of the bad guys, you knew he was just going to screw over his boss somehow.
Yeah, he hates his boss. He's awesome. I loved his voice. I loved, I don't know. Just, I think he's got some of the best lines. I love when he kicks the damaged Megatron out of the spaceship. He's like, if we can just get rid of this junk, and he just kicks him out. I love him.
I kind of like the Decepticon that was trapped on Cybertron. Was it Shockwave?
Oh, the other one, Shockwave. Yeah.
Yeah. It was pretty cool. I think as far as the toys from the first line, Soundwave was the best. With the cassettes, those cassettes were pretty cool.
A friend of ours as a kid had the Omega Supreme one. It took like an hour to transform.
Is that the one with the train and the space?
Yeah.
What was the other? Because there was two good guy bases. There was Omega Supreme, and then
he wasn't a base. You're thinking probably more of the towns, Triptychon and Metroplex.
Was Metroplex that one?
Metroplex was the good guy. Triptychon was the bad guy town base.
Because I had Triptychon, and Triptychon was awesome.
Omega Supreme was just the rocket with the little train that ran around it.
Oh, I kind of He's got a train that runs around him. He's a base. If you have a train running around you, you're a base. That counts.
I think so.
By the way, so here is Orson Welles' quote about being in Transformers. I menace somebody called something or other, then I'm destroyed. My plan to destroy whatever it is thwarted, and I tear myself apart on screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that he's very happy about playing something that he has no idea what anything this is about. He's like, just like
He sounds awesome.
Unicron is really ominous and he just seems like so big and like so unstoppable. And then like when he turns Megatron into Galvatron, what's the liquid? Was that just pure energon liquid or
it was dark energon.
okay.
I love like cartoon logic to be like, well, we've got energon and we want to make this guy worse. What do we make? Dark energon.
That's very scientific because there's matter and there's antimatter.
So I want to make a quick aside about Transformers and G.I. Joe and how our problems that we think of as being modern problems were with us prominently enough to feature in these major 1984 and 1985 cartoons. In Transformers, it was all about scarcity of energy. And in G.I. Joe, it's all about terrorists. And this is in kids.
Thank God we've solved both of those things.
Right. And this is in kid cartoons in 1984 and 1985. How crazy is that?
Well, right now we need a Superman 4 to come get rid of all the nuclear weapons before shit happens over there in Ukraine.
Right.
Plus, Trump would love him because he could build a wall with his eyes.
So true. On a lighter note, I'm just going to give a shout out to the Dinobots. I thought the Dinobots were awesome.
Yeah, they were hilarious.
Toys, and they were pretty good characters in the show. Do you guys know why Megatron is big, even though he's a gun, in comparison to the Autobots? Because it seems like Megatron should be really small because he's a gun. Soundwave should be really small because he's a cassette player.
Is there an in-canon reason?
There's a simple answer. They came from two different toy lines.
Fair enough.
And they just threw them together in a show, and they're like, we'll just.
Well,
pretend.
with Soundwave, you can make it work because you can just say, well, he's a really big tape player.
Well, the boom boxes were pretty big.
But with Megatron, you really have a tough one because like Starscream will literally hold Megatron in his hand like this. And meanwhile, they're standing next to each other a minute earlier and they're the same size. It's a little tough. Also, where does Optimus's trailer come from? Every time he transforms, the trailer just like is right there. He could be on another planet somewhere and just like transforms. There's the trailer. It's right there.
Well, and the little one that lives inside there is, barely ever let out of that trailer.
Yeah, that's not a healthy relationship.
Wheelie. It's like
I feel like there's the Room style or a Room style movie to be made about the little transformer that lives in Optimus's trailer.
Yeah.
He's just been in there for like 25 years, just like making hash marks on the wall.
Kathy Bates keeps him there.
So you were talking earlier about rip-off toys with My Little Pony, and Transformers has a ton of rip-off toys. I think one of the interesting things, I'm not a Transformer toy expert, but I have noticed that some of the rip-off toys are actually more valuable than the Transformers because some of them are really rare.
I can't I think that's a whole rabbit hole to go down, like the worth of old toys, and like it's a whole huge marketplace, and whether they're packaged or not packaged. And
I will just say that I have a moral problem with people buying packaged old toys. I think it's sad. Toys are made to play with, not to hang on the wall.
It's sort of along the same lines for comic book fans about buying encapsulated comic books.
It's the same deal for me.
I am
can't-
for the most part against it, but like, so I've encapsulated a fair number of my comics, not a ton, probably less than 20. They're not comics that I plan on reading because well, I'm not going to get into it, but I've encapsulated a few, but I understand the thought process behind it. And just sort of encapsulating willy-nilly is kind of weird to just like it's not supposed to be, it's supposed to be read, but
But if you have like a number one that's worth, thousands of dollars, obviously you'd do that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Avengers #1 signed by Stan Lee, and I don't feel bad about encapsulating that because I can read it. I can read it on the app, but I like having that too. So I sort of see both sides of it. So Transformers, the movie, I think, was a big changing point because the movie is really violent. Everybody dies, and there's some cursing, which I think is something that's I don't know. Is that the first grim reboot? I mean, it's not really a reboot exactly, but like it's very grim, and it's sort of meant for kids of our, or people that were kids of our age. And then you fast forward in the 90s and 2000s, and all of a sudden we start getting tons of grim reboots. So
I think it's interesting that you calling it a grim reboot because I can see that. I remember from the time, like my general feeling from the time was that people just objected to it mostly because they killed off their favorite characters and brought back a whole new cast of characters that nobody cared about.
Well, and obviously the reason they killed off the characters was so they could later bring them back, and they looked slightly different, and they could make a new toy based on that new version of the character.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But I didn't see it as a reboot.
Well, no, not exactly. Not exactly. I did like, was Omega Supreme the white truck, the one that was basically Optimus Prime except white?
No,
Ultra Magnus.
Ultra Magnus. That's it.
That's right. That's right. I had him. He at least had a trailer that could become part of him, so he could be like a bigger robot with the trailer, which was kind of cool. And the trailer, I don't know, his trailer probably appeared out of nowhere. Like they must have just like pocket dimensions with semi trailers just held in them. Yeah,
It was a holster of holding.
So who are your favorite Transformers, Brandon?
Well, I already said mine while you're fixing your camera, but Starscream is without a doubt my favorite Transformer.
Who else you like? Well, actually, Brandon, I have a great question for you. Soundwave versus Shockwave.
Probably Soundwave.
Fair enough.
I really like a lot of his cassettes too, like Laserbeak and Ravage and Rumble and then I thought they all had some pretty great personalities in them too.
But there was more than one Rumble, right? Wasn't there like multiple that were kind of the same?
No, there's a Rumble and there's one that looks and has a name just like him, kind of.
Tumble.
Maybe that was Ravage.
No, Ravage was the dog.
Ravage was the dog.
It's not a dog. It's Panther.
What was the bird?
Laserbeak.
That was Laserbeak.
Laserbeak.
Or not dog. You know what I mean? Like a dog-like creature, whatever he was.
Yeah.
But no, I remember
Rumble's the one that pounds the ground.
Right.
He's the one that says nobody calls Shockwave uncrosomatic and stuff.
Jim, who are your favorites?
I liked Grimlock from the Dinobots. I liked Shockwave on the show. I think Soundwave was probably, like I said earlier, probably the best toy from the first generation. The cassettes were just so cleverly designed.
Yeah, they were.
Really cool.
You remember that Soundwave had an Autobot counterpart? Or
yeah, I think I do.
Yes. Oh,
Blaster?
Yeah, he kind of sucked thoh.
I think I might have had that toy.
So I will also say, give a shout out to the toy designers. I think I just popped in my head. One of my favorite parts of the design of Soundwave is the batteries turned into his guns. How awesome is that?
I think regardless of what you think about the cartoon, as far as if it's your favorite or not quite your favorite, they probably were the best toys. Like just overall, like the neatest, and the ones that like if you saw somebody with a Megatron or something like that, you're like, oh, that's a cool toy. And there was so damn many of them. Like you
and
couldn't
the actual toy of Megatron looks like an old Luger.
Right. I mean, they were probably too accurate in some ways.
Wilson's
and,
got the ones that he owns. He's got his Transformers down as far as like he could do like like soldiers like can blindfold themselves and dismantle a gun or whatever. He can transform his Transformers about like that. Just not even looking.
I'd need the instructions now.
There, another friend of ours, Curtis, his favorite of the cartoons, and I didn't even realize this was a guy, but I vaguely remember him because he would turn into a microscope or something.
Oh yeah.
His name was Calcutron, and he said that he really liked him because he was like when the bad guys would shoot at him, he could always dodge the laser blast because he could calculate where they were shooting before they could hit him, so he would never get hit.
The crazy thing about him is his microscope would just do whatever they needed that was science. It was just like he wasn't a microscope. He was just kind of a science-scope. It's just like we need some science done. It's like give it to him. He'll do science with his microscope.
He'll science it right up.
Yeah. What was your favorites?
Oh well, like I said earlier, I think my favorite to watch on the show was probably Soundwave because he was the most versatile character. I mean, but I was always kind of drawn to Optimus. I mean, that whole main hero of the thing, standing up for good and all that. I mean, I liked him. And the fact that his trailer would just magically appear out of nowhere.
No matter where he was.
Well, and one of the best voices in animated. I mean, listen to Peter Cullen talk about how he came up with that voice. It's pretty iconic.
Optimus is definitely one of mine. I think I liked was it Rodimus Prime, the one who took over in the movie?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
well, Ultra Magnus took over first, and then
but he only took over for like a little bit, right? Because he was like, "Hi, I'm basically Optimus Prime, except my trailer, my paint's a different color, so I guess I'm the leader now." But the other one that I loved, and he was only in like an episode or two, was Skyfire, and he was like a spaceship. Like he wasn't like one of the jets, but he was like a spaceship. Plus, he was like way bigger. Like he was like twice the size of like the Starscream and the other jets. And I just thought, he was a cool Transformer, and I got him for my birthday one year, and that was like the coolest birthday present in the whole universe.
It is the best.
Starscream and the jets.
It's the best early Transformer, hands down.
Is he? I wonder if he's first season or where he comes
remember
in.
I don't. What's that?
Remember the triple changers?
Yeah,
there was one that was
I don't know.
Space shuttle and a train and a robot.
Why would you be a space shuttle and a train? I never understood that. So I will say
honestly, if you had the choice between being a space shuttle or a train, it's like I'm going to choose a space shuttle most of the time.
Right. So unfortunately, as awesome as that toy was, I think it's like kind of pseudo Transformer because really it's a Robotech toy, isn't it?
We've already talked about Robotech.
No, we haven't, have we?
We mentioned him in the first episode.
Oh, it's on the 1985 list.
Or maybe we haven't. If we haven't, then forget that I said that, and we'll talk about them next week. The one other one that I loved was Devastator. I love the Constructicons. The Constructicons were great. And I love the fact that they fought the Dinobots because they were such like they could have made just a show specifically about the Dinobots and the Constructicons, just like screwing things up all over the place because none of them are super bright. And they're basically just there. Like I would love to see them just like sans any kind of leadership where they just kind of have to be on their own. It's just like the Dinobots and the Constructicons. Like, I guess we just punch each other a lot.
Well, there was an episode or two where Grimlock decided that he needed to be in charge because he was the strongest. So
yeah. Did any of you watch the 90s Beast Wars cartoons?
I did not.
When Optimus Prime was a gorilla.
Yeah, but it's not a 1-for-1 because they actually make an appearance in the newer series, and they're very clearly different versions of Prime and Megatron, because the actual Prime and Megatron are there as well. I don't know. It's different.
I remember them they went back to Cybertron, and like some of them changed sides. Like, I think Rhinox became Tankor, and Tankor was a Decepticon.
Well, Dinobot, I think, was a bad guy or a Decepticon and then became an Autobot or, well, Beast, whatever. But anyway, that's all 90s stuff, I guess. So.
And this is one of those weird ones where, so this show had, let's see here, 98 episodes in 4 seasons. But that's only kind of part of the story because it then went on. There was several shows that succeeded it, including Transformers: The Headmasters, Transformers: Super God Master Force, that's a heck of a name.
That sounds like an anime title right there.
I think it is. I think it's released in Japan. And Transformers Victory. I think maybe those are all. Oh, those are Japanese exclusive seasons, and then takes you to 1989, and then you get into Beastmasters in the 90s. So Transformers just kind of kept going, and I think we would be remiss, as much as I don't want to mention it. There is a director by the name of Michael Bay, who I am told has produced some films, and they are not good. Pretty much all not good. Do you guys have any thoughts on the Transformers, the movies? Just like,
I watched them.
Yeah,
I will say there's one cool line from Leonard Nimoy in Dark of the Moon where he reveals that he's made an allegiance with Megatron, and the head of the human security lady, the chick from Fargo, I can't remember her name. But she's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "I am a Prime. I do not answer to you."
I will say, however, that Bumblebee is good. The Bumblebee movie is good. It's definitely worth watching. It's Haley Steinfeld, and yeah, totally worth watching. Frances McDormand, Kale, that's the person you were asking about.
Yeah.
That being said, we're going to. Well, does anybody have any final thoughts on Transformers? I feel like we could talk about that for probably longer than we should, but
no, I thought it was good. It's still, I mean, there's still franchise of it going on now. Talk about a long run. I mean, I think it's not like Thomas in that it did have some years off, but it's been going on for a long time.
It never had that many years off, though. Like, it was never off for a significant period of time, I don't think. Not for more than 5 or 10 years anyway, where there was something on. Jim, any final thoughts on Transformers?
I love the cartoon. I think the toys were very clever. I don't think the toys were great toys to play with. My kids got a lot of the newer Transformers, and the newer ones are amazing because they're like action figures, but you can still transform them into things.
Really?
They're pretty awesome.
Kale?
The toys were interesting. The show is iconic. Like you said, it still carries on. Couple of really great voices in there. The movies leave a little something. The original movie, the animated movie, was great. Other than that, I think if you've seen the new movies and you thought, or if you actually like them, go back and watch the original. Watch the animated movie. It is so much better. But the show, like, I watched the show. I watched it a lot, and there must be some reason behind that.
By the way, and in the original show, Frank Welker played Megatron, among others.
I was going to say, were we really going to leave the Transformers without mentioning Frank Welker?
Just as I was ready to move on, I was like, wait a minute, we can't. Just for to close us out on that, I will mention Frank Welker did the voice for Megatron, Soundwave, Skywarp, Rumble, Ravage, Galvatron, Laserbeak, Trailbreaker, Mirage, Mixmaster, Sludge, Wheelie, Sweep, Frenzy, Blades, Buzzsaw, Groove, Sharkticon, Chrome Dome, Pinpointer, Steeljaw, Booper, Brutalo, Computer, Cybertronic, Narrator, Delta, Prevanus 4, Cat, Dr. Victor Frankenstein. What? That's good enough. I think there's more, but I think we're good enough. We've covered our bases. I think the only last thing I'll say about it is the thing that was crazy about that show is how big it was and how many characters they introduced. And I mean, clearly they were trying to sell a lot of toys, which they did very successfully.
Yes.
But like there'd be new characters like all the time that would just pop up. And I mean, Skyfire wasn't in more than a few episodes. But I mean, he was like one of my favorite toys. And there was tons of characters like that where they would just pop up a few times, but they were very memorable. So that being said, we will move on to the last show we're going to talk about on this one, which is a big show that I have very little to say about because I never watched it. But I know it was huge and people loved it. And it's about other robots, and it's called Voltron. So did anybody watch Voltron in the 80s versus the newer episodes or the newer shows?
No, I did not watch it in the 80s.
I didn't either. So I apologize. We're not going to be able to talk more about it in the 80s. It's just one of those things like we all miss a big show here and there. And Voltron was, I think a friend of mine had a VHS tape with some episodes on it. And so I think I watched 3 episodes or something like that. And I thought it was cool when the cats turned into a big robot with a sword. And that's about the only thing I had to say about it. But Brandon, you've watched the new Voltron, right?
Yeah. Colson and I watched the new one, and it's really good. It's very good animation. It's a really good storyline. The voice acting, the music, the whole thing is pretty good.
It's got kind of a weird life cycle too, because it's the original series is on from 1984 to September to November 1984. And then October of 1985 to November 1985. And then it's back on in 86 with a special called Voltron Fleet of Doom. And then it's off the air for like almost 10 years, and it comes back in 98. It does a little thing from 98 to 2000. It's off the air for another 12 years or 11 years, comes back in 2011. And then it's off for another 4 years before Netflix picks it up in 2016, which is kind of a strange life cycle for a cartoon, because it's like for some of them, they're on, they go off the air for a long time and then they come back. Whereas here, it like would go off, come back, go off, come back, kind of multiple times. So it's had kind of a strange life.
Well, and as far as, it's got to be influential in the whole Mecha Gundam suit anime thing. It's 70s with basically, it's got to be one of the first mecha, I would think. Oh, and you know who did the introductory voice in the opening thing is Peter Cullen.
I'm just kind of adding up here to see. It's around. It looks like it's around 150, 200 episodes altogether. Although interestingly enough, you can definitely see how they kind of, the Netflix seasons, it looks like, are somewhere in between 6 and 13 episodes per, which is a lot more manageable. And we've sort of talked about how shows have a lot of episodes, back in that period. So for me, I find 13 episodes to be a lot more palatable than something with, 20 or 25 episodes.
Does anyone know, is Voltron the first giant mech made out of multiple mechs, or is there earlier incantation of that?
Well, Constructicon would have been around the same time.
Yeah.
He would have been multiple robots going into one. And I think Constructicon appears in the first season. So they would have been relatively close.
Are you sure it's not the Destructicons?
No, it's Constructicons because they're all construction things. It's like a forklift and a bulldozer and all that other stuff.
So I think there may have been a Destructicon too.
Well, I think Destroyer was what they were called when they were all together. The constructed, because there was a bunch of them where they'd have a like the Dinobots didn't. The Dinobots were weird because they didn't transform into
Devastator.
Huh?
Devastator.
Devastator. Well, that's close. Yeah, I'm trying to find. I can't really. I don't even know exactly what to look up to see what the first of that would be. I mean, I would think it would be close to the first.
I think of Voltron as being the first. Honestly, like I imagine Voltron being older than the Transformers.
No, they're about the same. I mean, Transformers first appears in I think it's September of 1984, and Voltron first appears in, let's see here. Well, they both appear in 84, but September 10th. So they're like basically the same time, within a week or so of each other.
Did the Gobots come together into a giant thing?
I don't think so. I don't remember anything like that, but I wouldn't tell you that for sure. Yeah. I kind of feel bad about not saying more about Voltron because I know it's such an important show, but I just never really watched
Another
it.
little a side note, the Magic the Gathering as a card game has evolved a new format called Commander decks, and any deck that has a commander, or if the entire thing is putting equipment onto a guy and hitting people with it, it's called the Voltron deck.
That makes sense. Well, I think that gets us through 1984. 1984 is kind of a big year. There's a lot of really big stuff that pops up in that year. Does anybody have any kind of final thoughts on any of the episodes or any of the shows we talked about this year?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered it all.
The only thing I would add is I think Transformers and G.I. Joe have some interesting differences, but we can talk about that when we talk about G.I. Joe.
And in the comics have had multiple team ups over the years.
Yes.
There's been lots of G.I. Joe meets Transformers. Kale, any final thoughts?
Not particularly.
All right. Well, we're going to close it out for today with the 1984 cartoons, and we will see you back next week for, amazingly enough, 1985. All right. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and have a good drink, and have a good day.